became a powerful team, and that's how Fresh Nuts was born. Whereas but St. Lucia, who else but First National Bank would partner with a former pig farmer to build a business from coconuts? First National Bank, local and supporting small businesses like myself.
Caribbean Futures. Climate Action. Fourth Industrial Revolution. Creative Futures. Youth and Social Entrepreneurship. Only at Unthink, a one-day thought festival with keynote speakers, panels, and interactive audience participation. Brought to you by Sir Arthur Lewis Community College.
It's here at last! The HCS News Force mobile app. Imagine the world at your fingertips. Get the latest breaking news, complete with video. Watch HGS live in high definition. Get instant notifications whenever news breaks. Get the latest sports. And weather.
Weather conditions today remain mostly fair.
Vote in the e-poll. Listen to Radio 100. So just dance. Would you like to become an HGS iReporter? With the News Force app, you can share your video and pics of what's happening in your community with our newsroom. Just point, click, and upload. Download from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. And here's the best part, it's free. And there's more. As an introductory offer, all persons downloading the app get a free data package from their mobile provider. So start downloading now. The HCS News Force app. Anytime, anywhere, any device.
What is Unthink? Unthink is a one-day thought festival with keynote speakers, panels, and interactive audience participation in commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the passing of Sir Arthur Lewis. Unthink will be held this Tuesday, 15th June 2021. The topics to be addressed: climate action, youth and social entrepreneurship, Caribbean futures, the fourth industrial revolution, and creative futures. Unthink, critical perspectives on globalization and sustainable development in a post-pandemic world. Brought to you by the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College.
Our final panel in the evening is panel 5, Youth and Social Entrepreneurship. Youth employment entrepreneurship are expected to be one of the biggest areas of impact from the global pandemic. How is this to be addressed? What role can expanding models of social entrepreneurship play in advancing the interests of the next generation of entrepreneurs, activists, and change makers? We have asked the youth to speak about the prospects for the youth, and we have given them the responsibility of closing off our Thought Festival, moderated by Raisa Joseph and Rahim Augustine Joseph.
Good night, everybody. Welcome to the last lap of the relay, the Unthink Thought Festival. We've been here literally for the entirety with a range of sessions on climate change, on productivity, on how exactly that we create institutional change. But I am Rahim Augustine Joseph, a former student of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College and St. Mary's College, which happens to be the only school within the Caribbean region with 2 Nobel laureates. So we could call St. Mary's College the Caribbean laureate. But suffice it to say, that is essentially not why I'm here today. And the only thing that I could think of in relation to my presence here is that some of my colleagues, upon seeing me here, might say that I'm the only student from Sir Arthur Lewis Community College who have graduated twice. Once as a student and second as a valedictorian. But I'm even more happy tonight because the college has continued to engage alumni in a very, very active way, because they want to essentially attempt to serve as the intellectual hub. And I'm happy with the work that they've been able to achieve thus far. So, Raisa, your comments, your introduction.
Good evening, viewers. Bienvenue. On souhaite nous kay une discussion sur divers sujets comme développement du web, jeunesse, agriculture, et puis collège Alpha Louis Community College kay une discussion ça là et puis jeunesse divers l'industrie cette ici. So tonight, Ryan, for the benefit of all our viewers, because we know we're speaking to a bilingual audience, we are ecstatic to be part of this process, the inaugural Thought Festival, looking at the importance of ideas in development in our society. And throughout the day, we looked at a range of topics, as you rightfully said, creative industry, sustainable development, and this evening's panel will look at youth and social entrepreneurship. And we are very privileged to have youth from wide-ranging disciplines who will speak to their expertise and more critically, Caribbean development in a post-pandemic era.
Right, so just to come in very quickly, not just sort of jump ahead of our time a bit, but what has always fascinated me about Sir Arthur Lewis is his fundamental and unrelentless belief through his works and teachings of knowledge, and by extension, education as a facilitator of that knowledge. And he saw education through his works and his teachings as this great liberator. He saw education as the conduit through which one could realize their fullest potential. And what is even more instructive is that we must be able to situate him within the context of colonial St. Lucia at the time when he was growing up. And that there must have been a certain thinking within his head that would have been able to propel him beyond the occasion and beyond the circumstances. And for me, the extent to which that these circumstances still exist is still moot. But more than that, we need to be able to assess this current environment and look at what the future of work looks like, etc. Because we understand the mismatch, and of course, and I respect but I understand in most respects that this is essentially what the college is trying to be able to achieve. I'm comforted because the college has articulated for the most part through their mission, sustainability, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And more than that this college must be a gateway for global careers. But even more than that, right, sir, we must, as he said, and of course we would have discussed this earlier in our conversations, that the fundamental cure for poverty is not money, but knowledge. And people sometimes say education as the replacement of that word, but we understand the education as the great facilitator of that knowledge. And suffice it to say, there must be institutions that facilitate that sense of knowledge sharing and the springing of new ideas and innovation, etc., etc. But I think what SAFA wants us to do, even tonight, is unthink. Yeah, and I think a lot of what he would have been able to premise through his works, etc., was a process of him unthinking the society that he lived in. Because for him to have kept it and thought of it as it were, we know that he would not have been the pioneer that he was today. So tonight is about unthinking what we know and thinking the society. And maybe you could tell us what exactly you believe in thinking tonight.
Well, you opened up the discussion quite briefly in thinking about the words of Sir Arthur Lewis. But for us, 30 years on after his passing, we need to see how thought becomes action, and not just for persons within the institutional framework, but persons in the community. This very panel this evening is part of educating our society in a broader way. And our panel this evening, both in studio and those who will be joining us virtually, will be exploring how we as a society unlearn and relearn. Evelyn Toffler spoke about the illiterate of the 21st century being that individual who cannot unlearn. And there are many things that we have been taught that we need to do away with in order to step forward into a future that has greater promise. And with that respect, I think our panel is well suited to assist us in delving into that topic, and also for our viewers who are following us on our live stream at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College page and HGS, you are free to send in your questions because you are going to be an important part of tonight's discussion. And at this time, I think we should speak to the range of gender dynamics we have this evening, and also the fact that we're stepping outside of regular occupations that we would normally discuss when we think about the youth of the future, entrepreneurship, because it's generally classed into persons being doctors and lawyers. Not that they do not play a critical role in development, but we know that our society has persons with varied intelligences, and that's what we're here about tonight.
So, of course, right now we'll go into the bios of our panelists tonight, in which you're able to see their personalities and their experiences and things that they've been able to achieve in their lifetime, and I dare say short in certain instances. And then, of course, we'll engage in this critical discussion. Tonight is really about unthinking.
Michelle Bodley is the Sustainable Energy Project Development and Gender Expert with the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, CCRE, a specialized institution at CARICOM, where her work contributes to the transformation of the energy sector across CARICOM member states. She is primarily responsible for the establishment and operation of the CCRE Project Preparation Facility. Pairing energy with other passions, she is also engaged in mainstream gender into all the center's work, ensuring that gender and youth responsive programs are implemented as a critical contribution to the center's operations. Keithlyn Carew. A rural woman, first and foremost, Keithlyn Carew is an advocate and change maker in the fields of gender equity in agriculture and rural development in St. Lucia. She is also the founder of Helen's Daughters, a regionally recognized and award-winning nonprofit organization that focuses on rural women's economic empowerment through advocacy, capacity development, and improved market access. Ms. Carew is a One Young World Ambassador, the recipient of the 2018 National Youth Award in Agriculture by the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports in St. Lucia, a Thought for Food Ambassador for the Caribbean, a Forbes Island Innovation Feature, and most recently, the first ever English-speaking Ashoka Fellow in Latin America and the Caribbean. Johanna Dushaw is CEO of Algas Organics, the Caribbean's first indigenous biotechnology manufacturing company. Recognizing the crippling effect of sargassum on his homeland of St. Lucia, Johannan founded the company in 2014 with the vision of valorizing the invasive plant species into world-class organic crop protection and crop nutrition products. Under his stewardship, Algas Organics has processed over 1 million pounds of sargassum seaweed into fertilizer for export regionally and internationally. Johannan Dushaw has been named Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2017 and Forbes 30 Under 30 2021. Juan David Aristizabal is co-founder of Pro Talento and lecturer in leadership at the Colegio de Estudios Superiores de Administración Business School. He was co-chair of the World Economic Forum Annual Meeting 2019. He won an MTV Latin American Millennial Award. In 2020, Carter Foundation recognized him as one of the 19 emerging leaders in education worldwide.
Thank you for staying tuned with us. So, as you would have seen the bios of our panelists, I have a question that sort of goes to every single one of them. I'm going to sort of invoke the words of Safa here very quickly, when he said, and I quote, that the collective judgment of new ideas is so often wrong, that it is arguable that progress depends on individuals being able to back their own judgment despite collective disapproval, end quote. Now, this isn't a pageant, yeah? So I'm not going to ask you how essentially, yeah. I'm not quite sure what they ask at pageants anymore. Anyway, essentially, I want to get a sense from every one of you as to what were the inspirations and motivations which would have fueled your various careers as it relates to your social enterprises. Anybody could go first, actually. I guess ladies first.
Ladies first? Okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, you're very right. So Arthur, I think his strategies and theories are as relevant today as they were when he wrote them. To be honest with you, he focused quite a bit on structural transformation. And I think that's quite important, not only in our region, but globally, because at the end of the day, we need to focus on the changing of systems and essentially unthinking. And basically, that's really, I felt like what pushed my path. Essentially, I felt like in the agricultural sector, we sort of saw a cyclical, I wouldn't say failure, but a cycle of mishaps that kept on continuing. And I think with my organization, Helen's Daughters, what we're basically intentionally doing is institutional bypass. So where things aren't going right, we sort of find pathways or create new pathways to get to where we need to be.
Joanna?
Sure. I think Safa's words there, I think an embodiment of what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is not generally about consensus in initial instances. You see an opportunity and people may tell you that it's crazy or it won't work or the market is too small for it, it's not ready for it. But it's really incumbent on the person who generated the idea or who has the idea to put skin in the game and actually go out and bring it to fruition. I think that's basically the genesis of Algas Organics. We saw an issue with the sargassum seaweed. And we went to various institutions at the time to say, hey, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to convert this material into something of value. And at the time, that was looked on as insane, and it would never work, and it has worked. So I think that you have to see what nobody else is seeing, and in Safa's words, just pursue that and actually bring it to fruition. So yeah, I think that's what entrepreneurship is all about.
All right, thanks for that, John. We're definitely going to explore that tonight. Charlie?
Good evening, and it's surely a pleasure joining from Barbados this evening to celebrate the life and work of Sir Arthur. And in fact, I believe that he was an advocate for change makers. And I think for me, what has led me to the path that I follow is the inspiration of the change makers of yesteryear. And so I would have started along a path of focusing on environment. And that led me, though, to understanding that there was so much more to sustainable development than just the environmental aspects, as we know it, the three pillars being environmental, economic, and social aspects. And so that led me into specializing in energy, sustainable energy that is for both renewable energy and energy efficiency, with even a focus on energy economics and assisting key stakeholders in developing projects to close the gaps, because there are several gaps. And as you mentioned, can we do this alone? No, we can't, but we can surely do our part in changing the game. And essentially that is what has led me to where I am today.
Wonderful.
One. One, you hear, right?
The beauty of technology at this time. We wait for one to come in. I think what has been marvelous about our panelists and their contributions thus far is that everybody is coming from their own specific field and literally unthinking to try to create the opportunities that they have while we await one's response. And I think it would be interesting to note what their aim has been in terms of creating value in society beyond just establishing a business, because we're looking at social enterprises that seek to meet or address a social need. So while we wait for one to come in who's experiencing some technical difficulties at this time, we want to throw the question to our panelists. What was the social need that you saw arise, and how did you now endeavor to now try to become that change actively?
Again, the social, environmental, economic, I think the need straddled a few areas, and so it was economic, social, environmental. The sargassum seaweed, of course, still to a large extent. We saw that issue a few years ago, wreaking havoc on the coastal communities. We saw its impact on the fishery sector. We saw the impact on the environment, and also as well on just health even, because again, when you're exposed to hydrogen sulfide emissions above 15 or 20 parts per million for 6 or 8 months out of the year, you could only imagine the type of health implications that will be showing up in the next decade or so, right? And so that was the issue that we saw. And for me, the whole point of Algas was to sustainably solve that by doing 3 things, right? 1, divert sargassum seaweed from the landfill to our factory. 2, create an industry where this biomass is actually converted into fertilizer for export to 10 countries at this point. And 3, it's really about, I would say, just community development as well, because we employ predominantly women and youth in our factories, and that's what it's about for us. So, to be very frank, I think that's the basis, that's the genesis of most social enterprises. They should sustainably solve issues that they recognize in their respective communities or areas of operation. So that's what we've been doing.
Fantastic.
For us, similar to Johanan, it was an economic and social problem. I think we've always constantly looked at agriculture as an export-driven product. We've never really looked to grow our own food. And currently, St. Lucia imports about $360 million worth of food. And even today, when you look at the health of our nation, we suffer quite a bit from non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and so on. And if you compare the livelihoods of persons today versus 60 years ago, they were much healthier 60 years ago. And I think one of the main things was a lack of investment and value in the agricultural sector. And furthermore, the actors, the agents in the agricultural sector. And at the very base of that value chain are women and youth, particularly women that tend to be the cornerstone of who builds our food palettes, who tends to pass traditions down in terms of diets and cooking and so on. They're essential. And I think that they're technically invisible. Oftentimes in St. Lucia, we look at women, particularly in the castries market, as vendors and not producers. And sometimes they also take on both roles. And on top of that, they take on the unpaid care of the children and elderly and so on. And I think that at the end of the day, if we're going to treat persons that are in charge of our food security, it's no doubt that we're in the predicament that we're currently in.
Wow.
Before we even go to Charlene, I sort of want to ask you very quickly, I'm cognizant and conscious of research there in the region that speaks to the negative connotation associated with agriculture because of the colonial experience.
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile that within your head, and you're able to motivate people and the wider society to recognize that this is important, that we must sort of move beyond what we think of agriculture to this new era?
I love that question. I'm happy you asked it. For example, Johanan is a product of the agricultural industry. We look at agriculture solely as raw production. Agriculture has several niches, the beauty market, for example, food, medicine, there are several areas. And also agriculture isn't only relegated to being a farmer. I'm not typically a farmer. I advocate, I work for farmers. So there's a number of areas and niches that you can get into in the agricultural sector. And I think that's the problem, is that we tend to think, obviously, of our colonial past as farmers, very hard work, muddy boots, and a poor man's job. And now when you look at some of the richest nations and so on, some of the largest companies in those nations are based on agriculture. So I think it's really, again, a matter of unthinking and redefining the narrative of what an agriculturist, what a farmer looks like, what that means.
Definitely. Charlene?
Raheem, unfortunately, technology is not on our side today. I can't hear very clearly when you speak. I could hear the other panelists, but I'm going to assume that the question I'm answering is what essentially was the need that took me down this path. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Very good.
Thank you very much for that, Charlene. Is one back yet? No.
So to answer that question, I would say the first need would have been the environmental need, climate change being the greatest existential threat to humanity. And unfortunately, our Caribbean islands are the very first to be affected. As we've seen in the last few years and in the last few decades, the increase in adverse weather effects And so for me, being able to be part of a generation that made significant strides in changing that narrative was quite an opportunity. However, as I delve deeper into my field and understanding sustainable development and having a passion, of course, for seeing my country, St. Lucia, develop beyond the confines of the present, it really became more of a socio-economic matter. Energy is a commodity that affects us all across all sectors. Personally, within our homes, is something that we must pay for, be it to move our vehicles, be it to cook our food, to turn on our lights, but more within the sphere of social entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs do pay that cost as an operational cost for providing products or services, even as they anticipate these products and services for the future. And so understanding how vulnerable we were as a small island nation to the vagaries of the international oil market. And I say that very hesitantly because lately I have sort of changed that narrative, because while we have been used to focusing on that as an exogenous effect to our sector, we're seeing that even COVID, and a completely unexpected event, has so significantly affected our energy sector. In fact, in Barbados, very interestingly, there is a back and forth between the populace and the government because the oil prices at the pumps have risen to an alarming amount. And so that need to convert the energy sector, to empower our people, and to support, and not forgetting this intrinsic link between energy and economic growth, to support that desired economic growth for our countries within the region. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Charlene, for those very critical interventions. I want to shift just slightly so we can have a discussion on how you became, for me, unthinkers and change agents, and for persons who are viewing, because very often when we look and conceptualize entrepreneurs, many young persons might see themselves as hustlers or part of a gig economy. Yeah. So how did you transform from seeing yourself as just having an idea to now bring that into fruition? And what encouragement are you giving to young persons out there in St. Lucia who have fantastic ideas, who have started out businesses but don't know how to move an idea into now actualization?
Sure, I think that it's a factor of three things. The first one is starting off by understanding that you can start small, but you don't have to remain small. And I think that that's maybe it's cultural, but I find that's something that is very prevalent here in St. Lucia. Somebody decides, okay, I'm going to, I don't know, start an ice cream stand, or I'm going to do something as a side hustle. And it only is ever about the money. We don't sit a lot of the time and think, okay, how do I add value to larger groups of people? So if I start in Castries, how do I expand to Vieux Fort and then Soufrière? How do I expand to St. Vincent? How do I go, regionally, internationally? So I think, the first thing, which I think is very critical, comes back down to thinking big, one. Two, as Keithlin said, institutional bypass is critical in a lot of instances. Some of the institutions historically have not worked as best as they should, to be honest. And as a young person growing up, you are probably going to move a lot faster than an institution is. And with the great equalizer, which is the internet, there's just about anything. There's nothing really you can't figure out on your own without, you could use the internet to figure out just about anything on your own. So rather than sitting and waiting for somebody at a desk who's getting a salary, who's comfortable, who's moving at God knows what speed on your project that's 100th in line, I think that as young persons, an integral part of success and moving beyond just the gig economy to something that's scalable, something that could make real money and cause real development, is looking closely at, okay, I've engaged this institution or these institutions. However, I have a timeline for myself. And if this is if they're taking 9 years to respond to me, of course, I'm exaggerating, then how do I go about getting to the intended end by bypassing actually that institution? And the third thing I would say is networks, right? I find that, you really need to surround yourself with high quality thinkers that you could bounce ideas off. And I find I was very blessed to have a mother and father who, and family just generally, who were very supportive and big thinkers themselves, right? It's very tough for a young person to go and say, hey, I want to start this $1 million company or whatever your vision is, to somebody who is going to shoot the idea down. You really need that circle of support around you, because this is not an easy journey. You see the nice cars and all the nice stuff, but it's tough, and you need that circle of support. So to recap, I'd definitely say right circle, think big, and institutional bypass where necessary.
John, why I still have your attention? There's this philosophical debate that's going on as to whether you can teach somebody to be a boss. I just want your viewpoints on the idea of whether you really can teach somebody to be an entrepreneur, or whether there must be a certain sets of circumstances which sort of cause you to do it, and to go into that era. And also, whether the idea is a bit over glamorized.
You have that at Google and Apple, where these are people who work within companies who might actually recognize opportunities that may add value to the company. And let's say I'm working at, I don't know, let's say I'm working at Algas, and I'm an employee at Algas, and I say to the boss, look, I see we're making fertilizer, but there's an opportunity to make fungicides and pesticides. And I have the experience and background. I can develop this. I get a stake in the new company or the new products. And that's an entrepreneur. You don't have to take on the risk and sleepless nights of entrepreneurship, right? But to answer your question, can it be taught? I think that with everything you can teach basketball, but Kobe just had something that Kobe has. But you could teach a kid basketball. You could teach them to dribble, you could teach them to pass, but I think a lot of it is intrinsic. Entrepreneurship is not about, from my experience at least, eloquence or about having the right answer, the right. It's really a factor of. It's really exactly. It's really a factor of application of knowledge in a timely manner, and having the gonads to take risks when your back is against the wall and going towards a vision. I don't know if you could teach that part. The fundamentals, management, finance, accounting, marketing, yes. That part, I think, is intrinsic.
No, you said some important points, but I'm going to be devil's advocate this evening for persons watching and said, well, I have tried all of this and I don't have an angel investor, someone to back me and give me the finance. What do I do now?
Neither did I. Yeah. And I like to speak about entrepreneurship because I didn't have a rich uncle or cousin or anything like that, right? So I taught physical education at a primary school, right, with my A-levels, and I thought I was going to be a failure for the rest of my life. And that's where I'm coming from. So when I sit and I speak on entrepreneurship, it's really from the grassroots. And if I just give that story briefly, I taught because I couldn't go to university immediately after A-level, and I wanted to save money to go to school. That didn't happen because the salary wasn't, as they say in Central, too cordial. And so what happened was, I sat in the staff room at the Millet Primary School, and I said, look, how am I going to survive here, right? And that led to brainstorming, and I'm going through the actual processes, right? It's critical to assess first and foremost, even if you've tried millions of ideas or you've had ideas, assess what the opportunities are in your locale or nationally, community-wise, etc. So that's what I would say. Assess the opportunities, one, but two, don't feel sorry for yourself. I find that, I could have easily said I didn't have an angel investor. I wish I did. But not having that in the beginning teaches you management, teaches you discipline, teaches you to go out and hustle for yourself. It gives you that hunger. And if you remain humble and you use that energy correctly, you use wisdom, you pray, I think there's nothing you won't be able to accomplish. But that's what I would say to young people. I would say, not because Jack down the road is selling pineapples, you should sell pineapples too. Innovate, look at the ideas that are available, so the opportunities that are available, and hustle. Don't expect anybody to hand anything to you because most times they won't. But in life, when you get to a certain point business-wise, that's when they come. they don't come when you start most times. They come when you've delivered what you call proof of concept. You move from idea to something physical that somebody can touch or a service. And then the investor can say, okay, this person started from here, they're here now, they're worthy of the money. Your idea without work is not worthy of automatic money. And I hated that as an entrepreneur, but I had to accept it. And now you get invested. But initially, you don't. And you have to blood, sweat, and tears until you get to that point. And it's beautiful after that.
Joanna, you've given us extremely insightful food for thought on the process of becoming an entrepreneur, and that it is not a bed of roses. And it's important that persons listening understand that it's not a linear path. And very often people go into business thinking that it's only one path, but there are many paths. And we're just thankful for your candidness. At this time, we're going to go to Juan Aristizábal, who we were waiting for earlier on, but we're thankful that he can join us now. Will now talk to us about social entrepreneurship. Buenas noches, Juan.
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for the invitation. I am so happy to be with you today.
Yes, the pleasure is ours to have you.
Thank
We're
you.
just going into a discussion on social entrepreneurship, discussing what motivated our various panelists into going to their respective fields. And we would love to know about your field and as well the opportunities and challenges that you may have encountered.
Yes, so I think when you live in a country like Colombia, you see that you have so many opportunities and so many problems to solve. And I think what social entrepreneurship does is try to solve those problems. So you go to the places that the government or the private sector, they don't go. So it's an opportunity to fill the void that exists in those places. And also it's a great opportunity to use the creativity and the imagination to have and to use the resources that you have in your hands to solve the problems. And one of the things that I have seen in the past 10 years doing our social enterprises is sometimes people is answering the question about what to do, what is the solution for the problem, and sometimes it's better to solve the problem, to solve the question of how to do it. And why is that? It's because when we focus on how to change things, how to create solutions, we can build the partnerships, we can create the sustainability to be in the long run in social and entrepreneurship. And second, sometimes we don't talk about it, but I think the financial part of a social enterprise is very important. There is no social enterprise if you don't have enough cash flow to do your project. And in social enterprises and social entrepreneurs, we should learn every day about how to create revenues and how to create a cash flow so our projects exist in real time. Because of course we have dreams, we want to fill those voids, we want to solve those problems. But if we don't have enough money in the bank, we cannot solve the problems. And one of the things that we have discovered in our organization is we have to create models to create a cash flow and to have enough financial means to create the solutions for the community that we are involved.
Thank you so much, Juan, for that intervention on not what to do, but how to do it essentially. And this time we're going to go quickly to Kathleen, who will follow up with her response.
I actually wanted to touch on something that Johanna mentioned and you as well, because you mentioned angel investment, which made me think of creating an enabling environment. For me, entrepreneurship was never the plan. The plan was always political affairs, international relations, and the UN. And that's where I ended up. And for 5 years, I was frustrated because I couldn't focus on Caribbean issues at all. And I kept seeing a lot of models in Africa, social enterprise models, from persons who just woke up one day and got an idea and pushed through it. And I think, as you mentioned, when you hear the term social enterprise, angel investments, incubators, and so on, those are like myths in our region for some reason. I think that you'll see that for some reason, economies like St. Lucia are more forward than some African nations. But in a sense, the social fabric and in terms of even supporting businesses and young entrepreneurs is actually light years ahead in African nations and Asian nations compared to Latin America and the Caribbean region. And I think Johanna mentioned, for example, having a good support network and so on. But there's a lot of issues that we don't like to touch on in St. Lucia. For example, with me, I was born in a rural area in Babonneau. I felt like the right last name, didn't come from family with money. And to me, those were things that made me feel like I needed a label. I needed maybe be a lawyer or the UN or something to validate myself. And I think that's something that we don't talk about at all in St. Lucia. That there's a lot of classism. There's the reason directly that contributes as well to the brain drain in St. Lucia and people probably not wanting to return as well. And in general, there's just a lack of support, not only for entrepreneurs, but just for different ideas. And I think aside from fostering young entrepreneurs, but it's also enabling and having the right policies, the right projects and agents in place and empowering the right persons to create an environment for those persons to thrive in.
I'm happy that you spoke about these elements of discrimination, I would call it, from classism to not having the right linkages or boys or girls networks. And at that point, I want to come to Charlene to speak about issues of gender equity, because we do live in a world where ideas are not always equal, particularly based on what your gender or your sex is. So I'm interested in finding out, based on the fields that we endeavor to go into, what are the challenges for women and men in specific fields. And Charlene, I would like to come to you in your area of energy and climate change to speak to the challenges with respect to gender equity that you believe exists right now.
Thanks, Raisa. And I'll be candid enough to say, I think the first challenge is that perhaps we don't think we have a gender issue within the Caribbean. That issue is much more clearly visible in other regions, for example, in Africa, where you have the majority of women spending a lot of the time that could otherwise be spent in economic activity, entrepreneurship, doing a lot of the work that it would take to get energy services to their families. Our gender issues within the region, I believe, are deep-rooted and look quite different. And I will say, and without delving too much into policies and what our governments can do, because today I think as youth, and I must say, I think I'm on the cusp of not being considered youth very soon, but I'll enjoy the privilege tonight. And I think as youth, there's so much we can do around some of these barriers. Nonetheless, to touch on them, it is not a level playing field for a man or woman. And particularly in terms of entrepreneurship, the support systems are different. And Johanna mentioned that was such a key element of his success. He mentioned his family, he mentioned other supporting communities. And the first question we need to answer is, in the world of entrepreneurship, and particularly that we're discussing social entrepreneurship, what is the support system like for both men and women? And why is that even important to consider? When we think of the future and when we think of the role of entrepreneurship, for me, I think of social entrepreneurship as an opportunity to predict what is to come and to make provisions for it. And Juan mentioned very adequately the how we do that. And in that regard, understanding that diversity breeds innovation is going to be critical in how we look at gender. So the main point of the matter is ensuring that we can provide opportunities, and this will take us right down into the education system. How boys and girls are educated, how they're supported, the thought process and these thoughts of what gender roles are within our society, which are inculcated from very, very early and informative ages and stages of development, we need to unthink how we do that. We look at the grades, we look at academic scores, and the scores from the data from UE suggest that perhaps women are doing so much better than men at that level. However, if you look in areas of, say, biotech, and Johanna is an excellent example today, and so is Caitlin, and you look at green technology and the jobs that are created, and the entrepreneurship opportunities that are created, how many are effectively tapped into by young women? And so we must, one, build the capacity of our young women. We must empower them. We must move away from the unthink. We need to unthink these neoclassical designs and neoclassical thoughts and structures that this is for men. A man should be an engineer, a woman could be a nurse or a doctor. And even just entrepreneurship. I think a few years ago, it may be correct to assume that most people think it is more for a man because of what is required. But Caitlin is living, talking example today on this panel that this is not the case.
Charlene, I just wanted to comment very, very quickly. And I'm happy that you brought up the idea of unthinking the idea that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And that in some way and shape and form, that a man must be able to do this, and sort of staying in school is somehow associated with feminine. And for that reason, we could possibly say that men are dropping the ball as it relates to doing well, because to do well in school and be consistent is seen as something for girls. But I just wanted to be able to get a sense from the other panelists here. Amidst all of your conversations about institutional bypass, I want us to get a sense from you. How exactly do we work within the institutions and strengthen the education system more particularly? Because Safa would have already noted that, listen, education is the growth industry of the third world. And yes, the third world term is out of text right now. But I want to get a sense here. And of course, the college has been doing tremendous work in being able to improve the idea of what education is supposed to be, and sort of making it a bit more aligned with the fourth industrial revolution, making it more in line with entrepreneurship and creating the enabling environment. But I want to get a sense from you, how do we remove the education system from the linearity and rigidity that it's in, and also focusing on it being as a great liberator? Joanna?
You know, what I would say to that is, and that's my mentality and that's how I look at things. I find we as a people, as Black people, we tend to look sometimes outside of ourselves and try to change third parties and other things around us that we don't have control over. You can only influence an institution if there is political will within that institution to be influenced to begin with, right? And so I think, especially for the young persons listening, you have two options. You have the option of going the route of trying to mold and shape institutions and get them to modify their policies and all of that good stuff. That's long term. Mm-hmm. And I think that, as Raisa said earlier, life, business, entrepreneurship is not linear. And so as a long-term measure, it's important to, through advocacy, through various engagements, to present different cases to these institutions so that they can actually understand let them do a cost-benefit analysis through your engagements. But that's long-term. Mm-hmm. For short-term, the young person, whoever it is, young, old, whatever, you need to focus on yourself and how do you develop yourself to move forward. Because if you're trying to change an institution, you're going to spend your whole life doing that and have nothing to show for it because it's not within your sphere of control. But you can wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and study, educate yourself, and make certain changes. So within yourself and within your whatever your sector of operation is. So for me, we need to unthink that we need policy or institutions to do things for us, and we need to start looking at how do we empower ourselves as individuals to do it. And I'll just go to this quickly. Before there was, communalism is what existed prior to capitalism and all of that, right? It's communalism and feudalism and all that, right? And in communalism, what happened was the family was the government. And so what happened was, whether I worked hard or not, if the family killed an animal, whether I yawned for the whole day or not, I'd get food. And because of our heritage and because of where we come from, we need to look at just our history as well as a people. You find that we have grown to somewhat culturally, it's inculcated in us to expect to get from the spoils of the work that's happening around us without necessarily contributing value to it. So we expect an institution to do this for us. We expect a government to do this for us. We expect the rich man down the road to do that for us. But I'll go back to the first point I made, which is you are the macrocosm and microcosm. So you need to figure out what you need to do for yourself to empower yourself. That's, I think, the unthinking needs to happen in terms of depending on anybody outside of yourself to make positive changes in your life, because you wait your whole life.
Exactly.
You will. And we don't want to keep you waiting any longer, Juan. So just give us a sense from you, Juan, about the education system in Colombia and how exactly can it improve its stare in relation to entrepreneurship and creating the best enabling environment for entrepreneurs to thrive.
And I think it's a problem that we are seeing in Latin America and in the Caribbean is youth. I mean, we are suffering of youth unemployment around the world, and Latin America and the Caribbean. It's seeing that the problem that it's in our houses, it's our friends, our communities. What we are facing is people are suffering because they don't find jobs. And sometimes when people ask me, do you think that is a problem that is the system? And I think it's an education problem. And what I mean it's an education problem is when you see what is happening in the fourth industrial revolution, and I know that you had a panel on this, you see that we have to change what we are studying and learning. And one of the things that we have discovered is we have to create more ecosystems, and institutions should be working closely to what is happening with companies. For example, one of the things that we are seeing is people who just graduated from the high school are getting hired in companies like Accenture or McKinsey or banks just with their with a bachelor degree if they know how to develop and create code. So for example, software developers, it's something that is changing the market in Latin America and in the Caribbean. And why is that? It's because companies are saying we need people who are very creative, we need people who knows how to code, but also they need people who are ready to get into those jobs. And sometimes you see that institutions or even the governments, they don't understand that they have to change the way that the education system is regulated. And universities are very important. Technical institutions are very important, but they have to work closely to organizations and companies. There is a divorce between the two of them. So what is happening, for example, in some institutions here in Mexico and in Chile or Peru and in Colombia, places that we are very close to organizations and the students, is they want to work with companies who are really working to solve the climate change, but also they want to work in companies that really understand that diversity is important. And sometimes even those students, when they want to go and they want to go to those companies, they didn't have enough skills to work in a diverse company. And why is that? It's because sometimes institutions, as boot camps, for example, or technical institutions, or even some universities, they don't teach how to work in a diverse company. So I think sometimes when we understand that of course, it's an education system, but it's also about it's a problem of the young people. And what I mean, it's a problem of them, it's because they can solve the problem. You can see when they want to stop the climate change, they go do some strikes, they fight to solve that problem. But we need that energy also fighting for better education. And that's why, for example, here in the community college, it's very important what you see is young people, they participate in solutions, but we have to do it like in all countries in Latin America. Is the young people, if they participate more in the decisions that are taken in the boards of the universities and colleges, they can really change what is happening in education. If more young people participate in the decisions that are around education, education is going to change. So if you are there and you think that you want better jobs for you, for your friends, you have to participate more. You have to take more classes, but also you have to say to your dean and to the president, how can I help? How can I improve what we are doing? There is no government who is going to solve us. There is no president who is going to solve us. It's a problem that young people can solve if they work close to the institutions to solve it.
Juan, these are very excellent points. Education through participation, and I want our viewers to stay tuned, but we're due for a break at this time. When we return, we're going to continue this very stimulating discussion with our panelists as we unthink.
Born from the same soil, growing stronger. Raised of our own sweat and toil, doing it together. I'll bank for you and me, taking us forward so proudly. First National Bank, the best of who we are. First National Bank, together we'll go far. The pride of St. Lucia, here to stay. Growing up, growing stronger, it's the First National way. Oh, yeah. Every day we're making better, faster and smarter, convenience like no other. First National Bank, the best of who we are. First National Bank, together we'll go far. We'll go far. For decades every day, it's clear, it's true. First National Bank, we're here for you.
Caribbean Futures. Climate Action. Fourth Industrial Revolution. Creative Futures. Youth and Social Entrepreneurship. Only at Unthink, a one-day thought festival with keynote speakers, panels, and interactive audience participation. Brought to you by Sir Arthur Lewis Community College.
It's here at last. The HCS News Force mobile app. Imagine the world at your fingertips. Get the latest breaking news, complete with video. Watch HGS live in high definition. Get instant notifications whenever news breaks. Get the latest sports and weather.
Weather conditions today remain mostly fair.
Vote in the e-poll. Listen to Radio 100. Would you like to become an HCS iReporter? With the News Force app, you can share your video and pics of what's happening in your community with our newsroom. Just point, click, and upload. Download from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. And here's the best part, it's free. And there's more. As an introductory offer, all persons downloading the app get a free data package from their mobile provider. So start downloading now. The HCS News Force app. Anytime, anywhere, any device.
Hello viewers and welcome back. You're watching Unthink with me, Raisa Joseph, and before we went to a break, we were discussing education and participation for transformation. Now we're going to shift our focus a bit, looking at a photo that's going to guide our discussion this evening. So on our screen, we're going to see the social enterprise of a young woman from Jamaica by the name of Grace Foster, who was able to transform a situation of crisis into opportunity. Grace was an MIT-trained engineer who was among 2,000 Jamaicans left unemployed with the global recession in Mandeville. And she was determined to not merely help herself, but help over 100 members of her community. And she did so by transforming the bees in her father's farm into a social enterprise opportunity, soon becoming a partner with Starbucks. And the reason we are introducing this topic is we want to now speak with our panelists on transforming crisis into opportunity. We're in the pandemic, one that has really created unprecedented challenges, but it has also opened the door for opportunities. What opportunities exist for us to change challenges into opportunities for growth?
I think in general, in crisis, it's always ripe for opportunities. If we look at St. Lucia, for example, and the agricultural sector, the minute the borders were shut down, persons were laid over and so on. You saw thousands of persons moving from the hotel sector, a lot of them coming from rural areas, and what they went back to? Farming. You saw a lot of persons doing mobile farm to table type of markets. You saw persons marketing their products on WhatsApp, even farm food boxes and so on. A lot of ingenuity came from that. And to the point that now you're seeing a lot of persons that are thinking that was the tourism sector the right decision, because now I have more freedom, I'm making more money, and I'm happier in this sector. And I think, again, it's a realignment of our thoughts of what we thought certain sectors would be for our careers. But I think, I hate to say it, but the pandemic has been good for agriculture because it's pushed it and food security to the forefront. And I think now St. Lucians, not only in St. Lucia, but I think globally, we're now more aware of food security, of where our food is coming from and how important the sector is to us as human beings.
Excellent. We're going to go into Johannan on his thoughts.
I think that delivery options, I think everybody, when the pandemic hit, I was very upset to stand on very, very long lines to go to Massey. And so I think that people have already started to take advantage of it. But one of the opportunities was really just e-commerce and actually offering delivery services, right? I shouldn't have to leave my house to go get something. I should be able to affordably go online. And I think Quick Delivery does that, and there's a few other players in the market. So I think that was one of the opportunities that have already been exploited. But just e-commerce generally, right? I go online, buy your groceries, and then just have it delivered to you. Like what's it called in the US again?
There's a lot.
Which
one? Fresh Direct?
Yes, well, there's that one as well as restaurant. There's also, you can just pick up your phone and just order stuff. So I think that's an opportunity, tremendous opportunity. But even agriculture as well. I've seen too many times that even in agriculture, persons tend to stay as primary producers, right? Mm-hmm. Guys, there's a value chain. And the primary producer, although colonially, through colonialization and through just culture, we've been taught to look predominantly at being primary producers. But I'll give you an example. You grow lettuce. You go to the buyer. Your hard work is commodified. Your hard work to produce the lettuce, it's only lettuce. I don't care if you grow it organically or whatever. You're getting $1.50 per pound for that pack of lettuce, okay? If you package that lettuce, put your logo on it, you tell the buyer your price. Because you have moved from primary production to higher up in the value chain. So you're getting $1.50 a pound. You can now get $5 a pound if you want, and if you have buyers to actually purchase it. So I think there are tremendous opportunities. And I will say that the young people out there, instead of going to the fete every night, take time, go to Google and stop thinking creatively and using the tools that you have to figure out where the gaps are. You might have seen it already.
I want to just jump in for a moment, because while we recognize the importance of social media and e-commerce, do you think that there is also a challenge with literacy? Because we assume because persons use their cell phones and they're able to go onto Facebook and Twitter that, oh my God, they can now utilize these gadgets for business, for educational, productive purposes, when we have been really limited into just social fun, leisure, but not thought about incorporating it into making us more sustainable and more profitable. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, again, you have a tool. We have a tool in our pockets, right? And it's incumbent on us to use that to our advantage, right? But you touched again on productivity, which is a big thing for me in St. Lucia, because who's going to tell you to stop WhatsApping on your data plan and actually use that to do something productive? Do a course, do something. Who's going to? That's intrinsic. So can that be taught? Probably not. But anyhow, I think to answer your question, I think literacy is a challenge, but I think even outside of that, recognizing opportunities is a universal language, whether you're literate or not. I wouldn't have had to go to school to see if everybody's falling there and they can't cross, I should just put a plank across and charge you 125. That's just logics, right? So I think we're logical people. I think solutions are very intelligent people, and the opportunities that we can definitely exploit if we put our minds to it and focus on productivity. And I think that's a cultural thing as well, right? How many hours, I was just saying to my dad recently, you know how many hours each of us collectively spend online? That's time I could have done a course. That's time I could have done something else. But I'm wasting it on a line in a queue that doesn't make any sense. I could have just done it online. I think when we start unlocking and unthinking low productivity, we will want to address the public sector with, anyway, we're not going to go into that.
We're going to go into that.
But we'll also, I think, apart from that, address issues of productivity, because then it unlocks economic potential. Instead of going to drink Romany Cabo with my partners, I can now say, I'm going to drink with my partners, but the time I was going to spend on the line, I could do a course on Coursera, or I could put in an extra hour of work at my side gig and make some money to contribute to the economy.
But Joanna, I don't want us to run away from unthinking, but we're going to let Keith Slane come in.
I'll be very, very quick. No, but I agree with what Johanna is saying, but at the same time, I do feel like generally with human beings, we tend to follow what we see. You mentioned obviously productivity and literacy and so on. Someone might generally see everybody else use social media for fun and blah, blah, blah. But if they're introduced to using WhatsApp to market their business, or if they're introduced to using Instagram or Facebook to market, or, do some, then they would follow that. But again, I think that is where creating an enabling environment comes in, and having certain agents and persons there to guide them. Because again, not everyone is a Johannan. You understand me? Again, like that basketball quote used, which I like. Some people can shoot and some people can pass for you to shoot. So there's some people that need to be led. And I think we need to sort of balance that as well.
I agree with that. These are excellent points. And I think it comes back to the conversation we were having about institutional bypass, that yes, there must be some elements in which we transcend the systems, but we also understand that the majority of our people have to work within them. And if there is not change within the systems, persons are going to lose opportunities, and our societies are going to be retarded in terms of the kinds of group that we want to see. And at this point, we want to go to our virtual panelists to speak to them about some of the institutional barriers that we need to be breaking and the unthinking. Even when Joanna mentioned standing in line, the whole concept of virtual work, and that some employers still felt it necessary during the pandemic for workers to be in an office where they could have been home as productive or even more productive and safer. So these are parts of the discussion that we're going to delve deeper into. But at this time, I want to go to Charlene to speak on the institutional barriers and what we need to unthink and undo so that we can have a more productive society. Charlene?
Thanks, Raisa, and to the panelists, I'm quite enjoying the discourse. And just to chime in before I answer that question, in terms of tapping into opportunities, here in Barbados, and I make this joke, I currently am a resident on a limestone island, and I felt like I was on a volcanic island. But some people have used that opportunity to to boost up their products. So there is a particular business that produces necklaces, and she was able to capture the ash, and it formed part of these jewelry pieces that she formed. So I think to Johannan's point, it really is intuitive and on a very personal level, how entrepreneurs tap into opportunities. To answer your question on the institutional barriers, I'm going to start that answer by quoting, I believe for me, within my field, what is one of Sir Arthur Lewis's most impactful quote, and it is, "The subsistence level is only a conventional idea and conventions change." And why do I say that? While we want to encourage young people to do their individual parts, I also think that activism, and so to pair off both Johannan's point and I think a point that Juan made earlier, we really need to put pressure on our systems to collectively change the narrative. And because our subsistence level, and subsistence level refers to the minimum requirements that an individual has, an institution, a nation, and even in our case, a region. And these minimum requirements 10 years ago are so different from the minimum requirements for survival today. And unfortunately, our institutions, our policies do not move at half the speed that our circumstances do. And so a number of barriers do exist, I believe, that are hindering the progress in terms of entrepreneurship in general, but more so social entrepreneurship, because we're still stuck in the era of just profit, while social entrepreneurship has taken us to the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And so that enabling environment is something we cannot run from. But instead of focusing on what the institution can do, I think to bear justice to this session, and to our intention of reaching young people and impacting youth, I think I want to mention youth activism. I'm going to give, in closing on this point, an example in Germany. Only in this year, April 2021, a group of young activists took a case to court, and the highest court in Germany ruled in their favor. And their argument was simply that the state, through its laws, was doing them an injustice and placed too much burden on future generations to combat climate change. And I just want to close by saying they won that case, and the government of Germany has been given, in very short order, some time to change these laws. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlene. That's fantastic. You've given us a perfect segue into another unconventional point of view in terms of youth and social activism. And at this time, we want to talk about civil society and the role that they play, because they're often excluded from the framework of creating empowerment, and it's often very curtailed to central government. And I want to touch with Keithlyn and with Juan, because they are part of a very important organization, the Ashoka Fellowship, and they'll tell us a little bit more about that.
I would say thank God for Ashoka, because that's the only reason I was able to leave the UN and focus full-time on Helen's Daughters. It says a lot when an organization has 30 odd years of history, and I'm the first English-speaking Caribbean fellow, which means I think a testament to our region that social entrepreneurship is almost imaginary here. And I think, again, Ashoka is a worldwide fellowship that allows persons, connects other change makers and so on, and supports us, that focuses on individuals that try to, that are social entrepreneurs, that try to create changes to those issues that you raised in general.
Thank you, Keithlyn. Juan, can you join us at this time to tell us about your Ashoka experience?
Yes. So sometimes you need a mirror that tells you, like, when you see to the mirror and answers to you and say, yes, you are changing the world. And I think that what Ashoka did to me. I mean, I was doing something here in Colombia, in Mexico, but I didn't know about the concept of social enterprise. And I didn't know that I was a social entrepreneur when I was 19. And when I found what Ashoka does, I was like, okay, I want to be one of them. I want to be part of the ecosystem. And because they have this logo or this slogan, they said, everyone can be a change maker. And I think that's true. And I think the philosophy that Ashoka has is that every one of us has a talent that it can use to improve the world, that it can solve a problem that we are seeing in the world. And when I was 21, I think I was the youngest Ashoka fellow at that time. They really believe in what we were doing, because I think what is happening worldwide is young people, we are working to solve the problems with other people. And I think that is what we have to do right now. There is not a debate between generations. It's a debate about how can we work together with different generations to solve the problem. So Ashoka has this ecosystem where mentors, where stipend, and an ecosystem to improve your project, but also to understand that this is not about you. This is not about the person. This is about a system that needs to be fixed. And when you are thinking about systems change, you understand that you have to work with others. And even if you are not an Ashoka fellow, even if you right now, you don't know if you are a social entrepreneur or not, my suggestion is join a tribe, join a community of people who are trying to solve a problem. Because when people try, they will change it. And one of the questions that I heard from you, it was about the times that we are seeing. Some people think that the chaos is what is going to define our future. And I think it's not. Chaos is a ladder for our future. And this is the best time that we have in the region to solve the problems. But we have to use technology. If we don't focus on teaching and creating technology to solve our problems, we are getting behind the world. And if we don't solve the problems, what we are going to suffer with climate change or with not having enough food for our people is because of us. This is not because the United Nations, this is not because the United States, this is because of us. If we don't move now to solve the problems that we are seeing in our region, it's going to be our fault. And this is the time to be a change maker. And that is the purpose of Ashoka.
Beautiful one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that one. Unfortunately, we sort of very near the end, but we want you to stay with us for as long as possible so you could get the final contributions from all of our panelists, because tonight has really been about unthinking. It has been about interrogating what we've known for so long that we've accepted as the norm. But the pandemic, for the most part, has sought to allow us to think a bit anew. And I want to get a sense from you, the final comments to young people and solutions, and I guess the world generally, about what you think needs to be unthinked.
Sure. You know, the first thing is we need to unthink, go to school, get a good job, go to school, get an education, get a good job. Education is super important. But I think that we need to focus on educating ourselves to add value in our society, right? If there are already 100 people doing what you're doing, how are you going to add value apart from just getting student loan debt? You're adding value to the bank, right? But how are you adding value to your life? So we need to unthink, go to school, get a good job, and stay there for the rest of your life. I think that needs to be unthinked. I think we also need to unthink our private sector as it presently stands. The reason why changing the education sector sounds good, but it's impractical at this point, you need a private sector to absorb the people that you're training. Now, if our private sector is gas stations, and nothing wrong with that, but gas stations and clubs, and you're going to train a coder to do what? So you need a private sector that actually is adaptive, that is innovative, that is scaling rapidly, that can absorb the people that you were training, because education has always been about the private sector dictating basically what skills they need and actually liaising with the education sector to supply those skills. So there's that unison there. So that's two things. The third thing I think we need to unthink is because that we are small island developing states prone to exogenous shocks. I'm tired of hearing that, and frankly, I think it's a cop-out, and it stops our creative flows and processes in terms of how do we actually navigate the issues that confront us. COVID is no different to Sargassum, in my opinion, right? Sargassum came and everybody was like, oh my God, okay, here goes another thing that we have no control over. And you came in. Precisely, and I think we've proven that approach is like Pavlov's conditioning theory, right? So every time the dog, every time the dog drools, it gets zapped. So it's like, okay, man, okay, I shouldn't do anything. But that's not really what it's about. It's for me, it's really about unthinking, learned helplessness, and saying to ourselves, you know what? I don't have, my last name is not this or that. I didn't come from this or that, but I have a brain in my head. I have eyes. I'm an able-bodied person, right? I'm intelligent. Whoever you are, you're intelligent. And it's really about looking at how do I add value by solving problems rather than who can come, which institution. Take the power to yourself, because that's the only thing you cannot control the institution, you cannot control any government, you cannot control. You can control you. You can't tell me what time to wake up in the morning or not. That's my decision. So it's up to people to look at. And I think the last thing for me is unthinking that we have to abide by everything that society tells us is normal and is okay. All right, taking on debt and not knowing where you're going to work to repay it for the rest of your life isn't normal, right? Society says it's normal, but it's not, right? It isn't normal to be able to get a car loan faster than you can get a loan from a bank to invest, or any institution to invest in a company that's going to create generational wealth. That's not normal, but it happens, right? So I think there's a lot of unthinking that needs to happen along those lines. And I think if we do so, we will see real transformation in the Caribbean. But if we don't, time is passing and the world is not waiting for St. Lucia or anywhere to catch up. And you don't want to be left behind, which is already happening, I think, by and large. Thank you.
Just to touch on Johannan's point, I think one of the biggest things for me is unthinking what a good career is. Now, if to you, perhaps a good career is making $2,000, but I can wear a nice suit and I can work in an office versus wearing boots and making 3 times as much, then that's you. But I think, again, we really need to focus on real. I think the second thing as well is, again, being a small island state. Before, we were relegated to our borders. Now with social media and the internet, our reach is global now. I think we need to sort of realign again our thinking that whatever we do can only touch this soil and the places around there. And I think finally for me, the biggest thing is that, again, we spoke a lot about constraints and challenges in the future, but we also have to look at the opportunities. Now we have a lot of organizations, for example, the Caribbean Green Climate Initiative. They have an incubator program that is supporting green projects and so on as well. There are a number of projects, programs, organizations, agencies that are willing to put their money where their mouth is now. And I think finally, again, just going against the grain. If you have an idea, if you have a concept or whatever it is, go with it, regardless of what you think. Like Johanna said, you don't necessarily need to have a college degree and then a huge debt later on to make an impact.
Thank you so much, Vivian.
Juan and Charlene.
In 30 seconds.
30 seconds apiece.
Okay, so I think those before me have quite spoken to the individual, and I will speak more to the collective. I think we must unthink of ourselves as receivers of technology. We must think of ourselves, rethink of ourselves as having great absorptive capacity and capabilities. After all, we've produced 2 Nobel laureates. We must unthink what conventional educational success is and rethink what that looks like. We must unthink that our voices don't matter and that collectively we cannot advocate and effectuate change. And to our leaders and institutions, we must absolutely unthink what our present actions will cause in future for future generations. Lastly, we must unthink that sustainable development and climate change is for scientists. It is for us all to think of and incorporate into our daily lives and, of course, our entrepreneurial pursuits.
Juan?
And I have to tell you that I am here because of my sister. And I am saying this because I think she's older than me. And when I was 15, I saw her, my family was having a difficult financial crisis. And she passed through all the difficulties to get into her college. And I think she's my role model. And what I mentioned my sister is because I think there won't be a change without women. There is no change without women. So we need to invite our sisters, invite our mothers to participate in the change. We need more women. And there is every man that is here and every woman that is here. We have to invite more sisters to join the change. If we focus on women, there is going to be faster the change that we want to see in the world. So invite them and work with them. We need them. There is no change without women.
Thank you for that, Juan. Of course, the producers and the studio will forgive us that we would have gone over time, but I think it's all in the process of thinking. This morning, we started with a feature speaker, the new Caribbean Development Bank president, Dr. De Leon from St. Lucia. We focused on institutional change this morning. We focused on management and leadership style. We were able to focus on climate change and multilateralism as the beneficiary and of course as a solution towards the climate crisis. Tonight, what I really appreciated about this panel, right, is that everybody had a distinct and separate perspective. Johannan stayed the course of intrinsic motivation. Kathleen spoke about the global citizenship. You had Charlene speaking about collaboration, and of course Juan as well speaking about participation, and of course asking us tonight to interrogate our circumstances. And believe you me, I think we could publish many pages, just small snippets of what it is that we need to unthink. What say you, Raisa?
I think this evening's panel was extraordinary by any stretch of the imagination. But I think what stood out for me is that it's more than a panel. It's a movement that we have started and we must continue. And as our panelists rightly would have indicated, there are areas and opportunities that are available that we must share with one another. It's about partnership, as you would have spoken about. It's about activism, all of which are things that are verbs, that things that we have to do and not just think about. And I'm happy that we were part of this process there this evening. I also wondered too, since in our limited scope, there is so much that was left out, what the role of culture and creative industries might be in a discussion like this. When we speak about giving vision to youth and to a new society, what guides that? And culture plays an intrinsic role in that discussion.
I'm happy you raised it because you would have spoken about this afternoon. But more than that, I'm happy with the path that the college is taking as we speak, because Dr. Nurse and the team have been able to speak about the gateways to global careers and being able to say that, listen, you must not think, much of what SAFA would have worked on, that you must not think within the confines of your environment, but rather that the world is your home and that you could dream of a job in Dubai and you're able to achieve it. More than that, I'm happy with the collaboration with First National Bank. They've continued to be in the vanguard of sustainable development and being able to ensure that the college, as an indigenous institution, which I know that you are definitely proud of, they've been able to say that, listen, we are going to invest in people, we're going to invest in education because it is the great liberator. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Raisa will have the last word, but there's a lot to unthink tonight. I want you to go to bed and just unthink.
Thank you for being part of this process of unthinking. You are a partner with us, and we do not want you to abandon us. Be a partner for the South Louis Community College. Support education, support young entrepreneurship, and think, be part of a global movement for change.
Follow them on social media. Keep abreast. The college is doing amazing work.
Yes. On behalf of Raheem Joseph, I am Raisa Joseph, thanking you for tuning in. Bonsoir tout le monde.